Some nights haunt you forever. Not because something terrible happened, but because something should have happened and never did. I had spent all week preparing, rehearsing how I would tell him, smiling to myself in quiet moments, imagining his arms wrapping around me, his lips brushing my forehead, his voice whispering, "We're going to be okay." I was pregnant, and I was finally ready to tell him. The man I loved. The only man I had ever trusted with my whole heart. Daniel wasn't perfect, but to me, he was everything. We came from different worlds. Me, a girl raised paycheck to paycheck, always second-guessing every purchase, every dream. And him, he carried the air of someone who'd never worried about rent or how many groceries $20 could buy. His parents wore judgment in their eyes like designer accessories. But when it was just the two of us, there was no difference. He saw me. I mean, really saw me. He didn't care that I worked 2 jobs, that I didn't go to the best college, or that I still had student loans. When he looked at me, it was like he saw something worthy, something precious. We met at a coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday. I was rushing, drenched, late for work, and in my clumsiness, I knocked over my entire coffee onto his crisp white button-down. I expected him to be furious, but instead, he just laughed. That low, warm laugh that would become the sound I fell asleep to months later. He said, "Well, you definitely woke me up." We talked. That day, and the next. Coffee turned into dinners. Dinners into long walks. Walks into nights I never wanted to end. And before I realized it, my heart wasn't mine anymore. So when the 2 lines appeared on that test, I panicked. Not because I didn't want the baby dot, but because I'd never had something this precious before, and I didn't know how to hold on to it. Still, I believed he'd stay. Daniel wasn't like the others. He loved me. He told me so. I decided I'd tell him that Friday night. Cook his favorite meal. I even bought candles, cheap ones, but they smelled like vanilla and hope. I wore the red dress he once said made me look like a miracle. I was terrified, but underneath that fear, I was glowing. We were going to be a family. I waited and waited. The candles melted down. The food went cold. My excitement curdled into anxiety. Then dread. I called, texted, refreshed his social media. Nothing. I thought maybe he got stuck, or maybe something happened. But when midnight came and went, I knew something wasn't happening, and that something was him. The next day, I showed up at his place, hard in my throat. His roommate opened the door, bleary-eyed. "Daniel's not here." "What do you mean?" "He left. Last night. Bags packed. Didn't say where." I couldn't breathe. There was no goodbye, no explanation, no message, no note, not even a cowardly text. Just emptiness. The kind of silence that follows a bomb going off. I sat in my car for hours, numb, staring at my hands like they belonged to someone else. Like I'd somehow stepped out of my body and into someone else's nightmare. This wasn't how love was supposed to end. No closure. No apology. Just a vanishing act. And inside me, a tiny heartbeat had just begun. I was alone, but I couldn't collapse. Couldn't scream or run or disappear like he did. Because now, everything I did wasn't just for me. It was for the life inside me. A child who didn't ask for this. A child who deserved more than a broken woman crying on the kitchen floor. So I stood up, washed the dishes, and swore out loud to no one but the silent room, "I'll give you the love he couldn't give me, even if it killed me to do it alone." The first night I brought my daughter home from the hospital, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her, wondering how someone so small could carry so much weight. Her tiny hands curled into fists like she already knew this world wouldn't be easy. And I remember whispering to her, "It's just us now, baby. Just you and me." I was 22, terrified, exhausted, and completely alone. People like to romanticize single motherhood. They paint you as a warrior, a saint, a superhero with dark circles under her eyes and an unbreakable spirit. But the truth? It's lonely. So lonely. I had no time to grieve Daniel's disappearance. No time to scream, to fall apart, to ask the universe why. Diapers didn't wait for heartbreak. Bills didn't pause for abandonment. The world kept moving, and I had to keep moving with it. Because she depended on me. I named her Alara. It means bright one. She had a head full of dark hair and eyes just like his Daniel's. Big, curious, filled with galaxies. Every time I looked at her, my heart cracked and healed all at once. She didn't cry much. Not like other babies. She just watched. Like she knew more than she should. I used to sit up at night, feeding her in the dark, and whisper stories I never got to finish. About a boy and a girl. About promises. About a red dress and cold candles. I never said his name. Not once. When people asked about the father, I lied. He's not in the picture. He's out of the country. He's not ready. It was easier that way. Safer. Saying his name felt like giving power to a ghost who already stole so much. And I was determined. No one was going to steal from my daughter. Not even her own blood. The hardest part? It wasn't the money, or the sleepless nights, or working double shifts and coming home too tired to stand. It was the birthdays, the school forms, the draw your family assignments where she'd ask, "Mommy, should I draw a dad too?" And I'd smile and say, "You can draw whatever makes you happy." But inside, I was crumbling. Because how do you tell your child she was born from love that vanished like smoke? That she was the best part of a man who didn't even stay long enough to meet her? She never asked much, at least not at first. But kids are smarter than we give them credit for. When she was 7, she looked up at me one night and said, "Did my daddy love you?" I froze. Her voice was so soft. Not accusing. Just curious. I wanted to scream. To tell her everything. How he ran. How I waited. How I died a little every day after. But instead, I just nodded and said, "Yes, baby." Once, a long time ago, he did. She nodded like that was enough. And maybe, for her, it was. But for me, it reopened a wound I'd spent years trying to cauterize. Still, I raised her with everything I had. She never went to bed feeling unloved. Never left the house without a hug. Never doubted, not for a second, that she was the best thing that ever happened to me. And through it all, I kept the truth buried deep. Locked away in a box of memories I swore I'd never reopen. Because some doors, once shut, should stay that way. Or so I thought. Until the day she met a man who looked exactly like the one who disappeared all those years ago. And the box I'd buried so carefully? Cracked wide open. It happened on a Tuesday. Just like the day I met him. Funny how life loops around, circling back to moments you thought were buried beneath the years. Alara had begged me to let her go to the art fair downtown. She was 15 now, old enough to roll her eyes at my worrying, but still young enough to squeeze my hand when she was excited. I let her go with her friends. Told her to stay in the main areas, not to talk to strangers. The usual motherly rules. And I stayed behind, drinking lukewarm coffee and convincing myself she'd be fine. But what I didn't know was that fate had plans I never could have prepared for. When she came home that evening, she was glowing. Like moonlight poured into a girl's body and couldn't be contained. "Mom," she said breathlessly, "I met the nicest man today." I froze. Every protective instinct in me flared to life. But I didn't show it. I just smiled. Asked casually, "Oh, someone your age?" She shook her head. "No. He was older. Maybe in his 40s? He ran this art booth. He paints portraits and landscapes and all these wild, surreal dream things. But he talked to me like he knew me. Isn't that weird?" My stomach turned. I asked her his name. And when she said it, "Oh, Daniel," I dropped my coffee mug. She rushed to help me clean it up, worried I'd cut myself. I told her I was just tired. Clumsy. Long day. But inside, my heart was a thunderstorm. 15 years. 15 years of silence. Of unanswered questions. Of raising our daughter alone. And now, by some twisted design of the universe, he had stumbled back into our world. Through her. I didn't sleep that night. I kept pacing, replaying her words over and over. He talked to me like he knew me. Did he know? Could he feel it? I remembered the first time I held her. Her little nose, shaped just like his. The way her mouth curled when she smiled, identical to the smirk he used when he teased me. How could he not know? But he hadn't seen her since before she was born. He didn't know she even existed. How would he? He ran. He chose to vanish. The next day, I walked downtown. I needed to see it for myself. The art fair was still there, tints fluttering in the spring breeze, children running with painted faces, couples laughing over handmade candles and pottery. And then I saw him, Daniel, standing beneath a white canopy, hands covered in charcoal, wiping them absently on a rag as he spoke to a teenager with bright eyes and a familiar posture. My daughter. He didn't know. I could see it in his face, friendly, open, curious. But nothing in his expression said, "That's my child." And yet, he was drawn to her. Like gravity. Like something primal in his soul recognized her even if his mind couldn't. I didn't approach them. I watched from behind a vendor cart, heart pounding so loud I couldn't hear anything else. Alara laughed at something he said. He handed her a sketch he'd made, her face, roughly outlined but already beautiful. She looked at it like it was treasure. And for a second, I saw them both. The girl I raised, and the man who left, laughing, together, without knowing why it felt so right. And I stood there, invisible between two worlds colliding. Later that night, Alara hung the sketch above her desk. She said he reminded her of someone. She didn't know who. He just feels familiar, Mom. And I swallowed down everything I wanted to scream. Because how do you tell your child that the man who drew her face is the same man who left before ever seeing it? That the stranger she feels safe with is the father who abandoned us both? I knew I had to decide. To tell her the truth. Or to run from it one more time. But deep down, I realized something terrifying. This time, the truth wouldn't stay buried. Because fate had brought him back. And fate never knocks twice without demanding to be heard. I hadn't planned to speak to him. Honestly, I thought I could just observe. Keep my distance. Let this surreal thread of fate pass through quietly, like wind through tall grass. But the world has a cruel sense of humor. Because 2 days later, as I walked into the same art fair with Alara, her begging me to come see her new favorite artist, I turned the corner and came face to face with him. Daniel. It was like the years vanished all at once. His eyes hadn't changed. Still that soft gray, still searching, still sharp. But there were lines now around his mouth, his forehead. Time had etched itself into his face. And yet the moment he looked at me, it was as if something ancient cracked open between us. His lips parted, but no words came. And mine? I couldn't breathe. Alara was the one who broke the silence. This is my mom. I flinched. And Daniel? He blinked, looked at her, looked at me. And then, softly, he asked, "What's your name?" My name. That word that once fell from his mouth like a vow. He didn't even recognize me. That hurt more than I expected. "I'm Ava," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. At first, nothing happened. Then, his face went pale. Not the confused kind of pale. The shocked, gut-punched kind. The kind of color that drains when ghosts rise from the floorboards. "Ava," he repeated. No, it can't be." His voice trembled. Hands twitched at his sides. "I looked for you." A lie. A weak, pathetic lie. I didn't answer. He took a shaky breath. "You just disappeared." I laughed, short, bitter, involuntary. "I disappeared?" He opened his mouth again, but I cut him off. "You left, Daniel. You vanished. One night you were mine. The next, you were a ghost." "I never meant to leave like that," he stammered. "It wasn't my choice. My father, he found out. He threatened to cut me off. Said you were after money, that the baby wasn't." "Don't," I whispered sharply. He froze. "Don't you dare say the baby." I glanced at Alara, who stood between us, confused, caught in a storm she didn't understand. "She's your daughter," I said quietly. "And she doesn't even know." The silence was deafening. Daniel looked like the earth had cracked under his feet. He stared at Alara, really looked at her. And I saw it, the moment it clicked. Her eyes, her posture, the way she tilted her head, just like he did when he was trying to figure something out. He staggered back like he'd been punched. I didn't know." His voice broke. "I swear to God, Ava. I didn't know. I didn't know what to feel. Rage? Relief? Grief?" There he was. The man who broke me. Who walked away from the most important night of my life and left me to pick up the pieces. And now he stood there, shaking, begging with his eyes for forgiveness, for time lost, for a daughter he never met. But forgiveness isn't a gift you owe to those who vanished. Especially when the one they left behind had to become mother, father, protector, and provider, all in one. I turned to Alara, who looked up at me with questions pouring from her eyes. And I knew the moment had come. The truth had crashed through the door. And we couldn't go back. He followed us out of the art fair. I didn't speak. Alara didn't either. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was heavy. Alive. Every footstep felt like thunder in my chest. I could feel him behind us, trying to catch up, but hesitating. Like even he didn't know if he had the right to chase what he'd thrown away. And when we stopped at the corner near the parking lot, he finally said it. "Ava, please." I turned slowly. He looked wrecked, tired, pale, like he'd aged years and minutes. "I didn't know," he said again. If I'd known she was mine, I never would have." "Wouldn't have what?" I cut in. My voice was calm, deadly calm. "Wouldn't have vanished? Wouldn't have believed your father over the woman you loved?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. Because there was no excuse. And I think, in that moment, he finally realized that. "I made a mistake," he whispered. A huge one. Yeah, I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. You did. I don't expect forgiveness. I want to know her. If she'll let me. If you'll let me. I looked at him for a long time. And then at Alara. She was staring at him like she was looking into a mirror she never knew existed. There was something sad in her eyes, but not angry. Not yet. She was 15. Old enough to understand. Young enough to still wish for something soft. But it wasn't her decision to make alone. Not yet. I raised her, I said quietly. Every scraped knee, every sleepless night, every birthday where she asked about a dad she'd never met, I was there. You weren't. I know. I don't say that to punish you. I say it so you understand. This little girl you missed out on? She became a whole person. A brilliant, funny, fierce person. And she's not a second chance. He nodded, eyes glassy. I'd still like to try, he said. Even if it's just as a friend. Someone she can talk to. I'm not asking to replace anyone. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. This man. He wasn't the boy I fell in love with. And I wasn't the girl who waited for him that rainy night. We were different now. Wounded, but stronger. I'll let her decide, I said at last. She deserves that. He turned to Alara, cautiously. Hi, I'm Daniel. She nodded slowly. I figured. That made him smile through the pain. And for a moment, I saw a flicker of what might be possible. Not perfect, not magical, but honest. As we drove home, Alara didn't say much. But just before bed, she stood in my doorway and whispered, Mom, do you think people can really change? I paused, then nodded. I think they can try. And sometimes, trying is the first real thing they've ever done. She nodded too, and went asleep. And me? I sat in the kitchen, holding the sketch he gave her. His hands still remembered her face, even if his heart took 15 years to find it. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to cry. Not from pain, but from the quiet, impossible hope that maybe, just maybe, this story wasn't ending. It was beginning again.